As an
1,000
example,
restaurants
haircuts
in
you
over
can
100
get.
countries, Subway has the most locations of any fast food chain on the planet. And at first that sounds like a sign of a thriving subgiant.
Hey
However, Subway is
xQc,
anything but.
you should play
Subway's
Ghostwire
closed thousands
Tokyo.
of stores in the last
It
3
has a
years
cool
and
story.
saw a 25% fall in business from 2012 to 2017.
That's not bad.
So what happened?
Competition. Okay.
The chain began as Pete's Super Submarines in Bridgeport, Connecticut in 1965. 3 years later, co-founders Fred DeLuca and Peter Buck rebranded it to simply Subway.
Subway's famous
This it looks insane of a sandwich. I'm doing it.
What was so compelling then, and still is today about Subway, is really an open kitchen format. In many ways, they really pioneered that and the ability to customize your sandwich.
The brand redefined fast food with fresh ingredients that customers could see. Compared to other fast food chains at the time, it felt healthy. And it worked. By 1981, there were 200 locations across the U.S. And soon after, Subway went international.
In the late 70s and in the 80s and in the 90s, everyone knew about Subway. I mean, they were everywhere. They're still everywhere.
That's Joel Labava, an expert in franchising.
Got
Each
it.
store
Ooh, this
looks
is gonna be a
and
good
smells
chance.
the
This is gonna be
same.
bussin'.
They're all independently owned franchises.
The format is pretty simple. You buy a franchise, you get trained, they help you secure a location, they help with a grand opening, and you're open. You're open for business. Follow the several hundred-page operating manual, do the advertising, and customers will come in.
Not only were Subway
Boy, how
franchises
many?
successful, they were, and still are, one of the cheapest chains to franchise. It costs between $116,000 and $263,000 to open a Subway franchise. Compare that to opening a McDonald's, which costs
2.2 mil, yeah. Canadian dollars, like 2.5 mil.
Because Subways were easy to open, the number of stores skyrocketed. Between 1990 and 1998, store locations rose from 5,000 to 13,200. And in that same period of time, gross sales rose by about $2.1 billion. Subway's success continued into the early 2000s. At a time when obesity was rising rapidly in America,
It's only 100,000
Subway
compared to other
continued to market
franchises.
itself as a healthy alternative to fast food.
One of their biggest successes for sure was the Jared Fogle story. Everyone remembers those ads where it's him in those huge pants where he's showing how he lost all of this weight. And that just made them so much money, and it really made people think about Subway as a really great health brand. It was one of the biggest advertising wins that any chain's had in recent decades. So that was a huge, huge part of their brand.
Subway carried Fogle's success story for nearly a decade.
Jared, you
But by
fucking
2008,
moron.
The world was suffering from the effects of the Great Recession, and for many Americans, hunting for deals replaced the obsession with weight loss. So Subway changed up its message. In March 2008, it introduced a new promotion that would come to define the chain.
Oh, I remember that.
By August 2009, as other restaurant chains were struggling through the recession, the $5 footlong had pulled in $3.8 billion in sales for Subway.
Well, that's fucking busted.
A 17% jump in U.S. sales from the year before. But even the best deals run their course.
Ha, $11.
Starting in 2014, Subway sales began steadily dropping. Behind the scenes, many of the reasons for Subway's success had turned on them. Quiznos was once Subway's main competition.
Guys, I'm gonna be honest, chat. I know what I wasn't in America, but in Canada and where I live, Quebec, the Quiznos subs was insanely better. It was not even close of a margin. They was bussin'. It was bussin'. I love Quiznos subs. Guys, they opened up a location next to my house, and I would never go outside, but I would still go outside for a sub. I would walk there.
Tons of sub chains like Jimmy John's, Firehouse, Potbelly, and Jersey Mike's, and fast casual chains like Panera were offering seemingly fresher and healthier options. And they started stealing market share.
They're competing against people who bring in fresh produce every day. A lot of Subway locations only bring in fresh produce.
Guys, did you guys add the Quiznos sub? It was like a cold cut thing, but then it had this really bussin' sauce, like chipotle sauce. It's a really nice sauce. You guys remember that or not?
Produce once or twice a week.
On top of that, fast food chains that had been around as
That
long
was
as Subway
insane.
were coming up with healthy alternatives of their own and getting creative with new menus.
More and more fast food chains really want to have that innovation pipeline where they're bringing something out new almost every month. Fast food places are looking for ways to bring in new customers, drive traffic, and Subway has not tried to do that in the same way other places have.
But other fast food chains weren't the only competition for Subway franchises.
That is disgusting.
With
Jesus
Subway's
Christ, kill
franchising
me.
model making it so easy to open locations, stores inevitably started opening up around the corner from each other in lucrative markets. Take downtown Manhattan, for example.
Dude. Chat, when I went to Toronto, they have a pizza and a Subway every 2 blocks, okay? And I fuck with you not, dude. I was in Toronto, okay? Dude, one street, dude, not even long range. You back up like this, There's 2 on the same, I'm not kidding, 2 in 1 block. Dude, that's mental. That's
Opening up
insane,
around the corner
dude.
from each other in lucrative markets. Take downtown
Christ.
Manhattan, for example. Within a 15-minute walk and less than half a
Not
square
only
mile,
in
there are
one
10
spot,
Subway
in
locations.
multiple spots.
These
There's
locations
2
in close
on 1 block.
proximity began cannibalizing each other's sales.
The Subway franchise agreement, the contract, it says.
I can show that in Toronto. I told you.
Anywhere. There is no protected territory.
So bad.
So franchisees really have no say-so in where the other franchisees are going to open. It's a problem.
And Subway Corporate wasn't stopping it, because the company benefited from a high number of locations. More locations meant more franchising fees, and high royalties to Subway Corporate, which diminished the effect of falling sales from a single location.
When franchisee sales are kind of slipping, as long as they're staying open, it doesn't necessarily hurt Subway as much as it would some other chains. If everyone's kind of like chugging along, like opening new locations, then they can kind of keep on keeping on, and it's not going to be the end of the world for the corporate office.
Franchise owners, on the other hand,
My theory is that Subway became this like a lot of other fast foods, very location based, right? Which means that sometimes you'll have a good city, they open one, it's ass crack. Then they open another one 2 streets down, and it's insanely bussin', and you want to eat there every day or whatever, right? But then it kind of like started diluting, and it's getting less and less. And now it's like it's hard to find a good one, dude. But sometimes when you do find a good one, dude, it's kind of hard not to order there. It's kind of bussin'.
took the hit. In 2012, each Subway franchise generated an average of $482,000 a year. 4 years later, that number had slipped to $422,000 a year. For comparison, the average annual revenue of a McDonald's franchise in 2016 was $2.6 million. And to make matters worse,
Wait, chat, guys. If I bought a McDonald's, if I paid 2.2 mil in franchising, and let's say what, like 2 mil for the location, right? Plus salary, plus whatever the fuck. Plus, in 3 years, you're going in pure profits, and then you're making like what, like a mil a year, just because you have a McDonald's.
and to make matters worse, Subway would lose the face of its company. In 2015, the man who had embodied Subway's Eat Fresh mission was charged with possession of child pornography and having sex with minors. Subway cut ties with Vogel, and he was sentenced to 15.5 years in federal prison.
That's it.
Jared Fogle thing kind of basically
How?
went from a huge positive to a huge liability. Like the worst things possible that your brand could be associated with.
How
All
was
of
that only
these
15
things
years?
created the perfect storm for Subway, and soon locations started to close. In 2016, Subway closed 359 stores in the US. It was the first year the chain closed more locations than it opened. In 2017, that number was over 800, and by the end of 2018, over 1,000 locations had closed. With all these sour ingredients, it's hard to imagine Subway could bounce back. But the chain is certainly trying. In 2017, Subway launched its Fresh Forward program, starting with remodeled stores. The revamped location
These look like shit. I'm sorry, this is just not it. Guys, lime green doesn't say, oh, I'm gonna get a good lunch. It just doesn't.
featured new menu boards, Wi-Fi, USB ports, updated furniture, and music.
I will give Subway credit. They're doing something interesting. They're offering grants.
It does not. It does
If
not look good.
and
I don't
everything's
agree.
in line, they can get up to $10,000.
I want a foot long
towards
in my
remodeling.
mouth.
By the end of 2020, over 10,000 locations will have this new restaurant design. But Subway says food is its next priority, and it's backing it up with an $80 million investment in updated menu items. Subway's partnered with the media company Tastemade to develop hundreds of new menu ideas.
Bring back the steak teriyaki, dude. Where is it? Bring it back, dude.
Like the Green Goddess
How
chicken
hard can it
melt
be?
and the Southern-style French dip. In 2018, the chain introduced its cheesy garlic bread, its most successful promotion in the last 5 years. And in 2019, a line of ciabatta sandwiches and Halo Top milkshakes hit stores.
Historically, Subway would evaluate about 6 or 7 new menu items per month.
Wait, they're not the sweet onion anymore? No, they do. Shut up.
But we've set up a process and invested in capabilities where we're literally testing at least 100 new menu items every month.
As for whether or not all these menu items and revamped designs will stop shuttering stores and dropping business, only time will tell.
They need to figure out who they want their customer to be. I think it's really an uphill battle for them, but if they kind of go back to the basics, think about what people want, ask people what they want, and think about a little bit more innovation, that's kind of going to be a good start for them.
I disagree. I disagree. My five-headed business philosophy. Fuck the customer. The customer doesn't know what they want. Okay, think ahead. What do you want? What do you want to do? Okay, fuck. The customer is a moron. The customer is a fucking moron. They do not know what they want. Okay, give them something cool, and they'll enjoy it. What about it?
Chuck E. Cheese, when you're hungry for fun, it's Chuck E. Cheese.
Chuck E. Cheese was once the go-to spot for birthday parties, marketing itself as a place where a kid could be a kid.
When my mom asked
Jimmy
me where
John's
to
so
go for
good,
my
just
birthday,
look at their
I
commercials,
said
it's
Chuck E.
literally you
Cheese.
talking Link.
With its infamous pizza, iconic games, and this guy.
People loved the rat.
It was a huge success from the start.
Kind of like living your 7-year-old dream to just kind of
We didn't have that
roll
where I'm
around
from.
in a ball pit
Chuck E.
and
Cheese.
play some arcade games.
Through the decades, it became a behemoth of a brand. In 2019, Chuck E. Cheese saw $913 million in revenue. It had about 15,000 employees and over 600 locations across the globe. But with nearly $1 billion in debt and a 21% drop in sales in the first quarter of 2020, Chuck E. Cheese declared bankruptcy in June.
Wait, what?
So what happened? Nolan Bushnell, the co-founder of the video game company Atari, came up with the idea for Chuck E. Cheese. He felt there was something lacking in restaurants. He once told Fast Company, "I wanted to add a dimension of fun to the act of having a meal." So he put video games into a restaurant, and he served pizza, so while customers waited for their pies, they could play arcade games.
He is not someone who is coming from this from a pizza angle.
Sounds
He's like,
good to me.
okay, I know video games, and I think that I can bring animatronics into the world of pizza, which is kind of a crazy idea, but clearly it has worked over the years.
Originally, Bushnell planned to name the restaurant Coyote Pizza, so he ordered what he thought was a coyote costume for his lead animatronic. It turned out to be a rat, and Bushnell decided to run with it. First, he thought of changing the restaurant's name to Rick Rat's Pizza, but his team convinced him that having rat in a restaurant's name wasn't the best idea, so they agreed on calling the mascot Chuck.
Chuck E. Cheese was originally almost more geared towards adults. He smoked a cigar, he had a Jersey accent. It was kind of like an adult night out.
Like, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, you get it?
But pretty
Jeez,
quickly,
must wanna punch
it
him,
became
dude.
clear that kids
That's just
are the
scary,
ones who actually
dude.
enjoy being around animatronic animals.
And thus, Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater was born, with the rat mascot front and center. The first restaurant opened up in 1977 in San Jose, California, and the concept blew up thanks to 3 things. Chuck E. Cheese's could fit over 400 guests, way more than any other pizzerias, and the 20-minute window waiting for pizza was a goldmine for the arcade. They could lure people in with a few free tokens with each meal. People would stay, popping in quarter after quarter into those 75 arcade games.
Restaurants tend to be low-margin businesses, and those games are very profitable.
Those games accounted for 40 to 50% of Chuck E. Cheese's restaurant profits.
The iconic Chuck E. Cheese tokens, that's where people are spending most of their money, to get the tokens, to play the arcade games, to kind of have this party experience, not so much on pizza.
Now, before Chuck E. Cheese even launched, Bushnell sold Atari, including the Chuck E. Cheese concept, to Warner Communications in 1976. So in '78, Bushnell bought back Chuck E. Cheese for $500,000, and he quickly expanded into new locations. Then things got a little complicated.
Finesse?
Chuck E. Cheese's success caught the attention of businessman Robert Brock, and he signed on to franchise more than 200 locations. But that same year, Brock ended up canceling the deal, finding an engineer for animatronics and launching a family restaurant chain of his own. He called it Showbiz Pizza.
The concept was pretty much the same. It was different characters, but the same kind of like pizza,
What?
arcade games.
And while Chuck E. Cheese's had been growing alongside the blossoming gaming industry, through the early 80s it found itself in a bitter battle with copycat Showbiz.
There was definitely a rivalry between the two at the time.
And Showbiz had arguably better animatronics. Chuck and his friends were limited to frames on the wall. Showbiz had an entire band called Rockafire Explosion, made of full-body characters.
That's not
By
reliable.
1981, Showbiz locations were raking in nearly $1.5 million in revenue,
Jesus.
outperforming Chuck E. Cheese's by $260,000 per store. But Chuck E. Cheese still had more locations, and was still outpacing Pizza Hut and McDonald's at the time. So that year, Bushnell took Chuck E. Cheese's public. But there were problems looming on the horizon. Chuck E. Cheese's was no longer the best arcade, and it definitely wasn't the best pizza restaurant. As the market became crowded, novelty wore off, and things turned sour. To try and outpace Showbiz, Bushnell expanded faster and faster, opening a new location every 5 days and driving the company into debt. Then came the video game industry crash of 1983.
Oh no,
Then
then
turned to computer
then
games.
dude.
Consoles and arcades were hit hard. Video game sales dropped 97% nationally, and arcades closed across the country.
Wait,
It
what?
wasn't a great time to have a restaurant centered on arcade games. That year, Chuck E. Cheese's losses reportedly totaled $15 million. And a year
They got Terra Luna.
later, Chuck E. Cheese's declared bankruptcy. But its rival Showbiz? Well, that company weathered
Too
the crash
soon.
a little better. And in a wild twist, Showbiz ended up buying Chuck E. Cheese for $35 million. The copycat had bested the original. But the acquisition breathed some life back into Chuck E. Cheese. By the early 90s, all the Showbiz restaurants were transformed into Chuck E. Cheese's.
For some reason, Chuck E. Cheese, the mascot, really
Dude.
did have staying power. People loved the rat.
And those better animatronics over at Showbiz got a new life too. The Rockafire Explosion Band was stripped of its costumes and replaced with Chuck E. Cheese and crew.
The fact that Chuck E. Cheese died and then
That's
was reborn
wait.
in a new
guys,
company is
this is actually.
the fact that Chuck E. Cheese died and then was reborn in a new company is just very bizarre.
Fast forward to 1998, and Chuck got a little bit of a makeover. The parent company dropped the name Showbiz for CEC Entertainment. By 2000, there were 300 locations, and the company was steadily growing.
I would say the 90s, the early 2000s, Chuck E. Cheese was really thriving. That's when people my age, I think, like have the memories of childhood, the really nostalgic memories. The best era for Chuck E. Cheese, really.
This renaissance didn't last long. 12
Semets.
years later, even though locations continued to open up, they'd hit another sales slump. So again, Chucky the Rat was rebranded, this time as a rockstar mouse, with a backstory. According to the company's website, Charles Entertainment Cheese is an orphan who celebrates others' birthdays to make up for his tough childhood. The new
Jesus.
mouse came alongside an option of gluten-free pizza. 2 years later, despite slumping sales, private equity firm Apollo Global Management saw an opportunity. Chuck E. Cheese still had brand
that's kinda
recognition
dark.
and locations across the globe.
Restaurants tend to have a short life cycle. What's nice here is the children age out and new children come in. So that gives the business, or gave the business, a certain degree of resilience.
Private equity firms, they
How
approach
is
the owners
is that
with
so
an idea
fucking
that,
bad? Christ.
Certain degree of resilience.
private
Bro,
equity firms, they
hello?
approach the owners with an idea that, like, hey, we're gonna expand this business. We're gonna
What the
bring it
fuck?
to overseas,
How is he so
to other
bad?
countries, and so that's attractive.
Apollo acquired Chuck E. Cheese Entertainment in a leveraged buyout for about $1 billion. In a leveraged buyout, private equity firms purchase a company with partly their own money and partly borrowed money. That turns into debt the company is responsible for paying. Ultimately, the acquisition saddled Chuck E. Cheese with nearly $1 billion in debt.
It was quite a bit of debt for a company like Chuck E. Cheese.
Chuck E. Cheese already had a lot of expenses. Monthly rent on all of its locations, pricey arcade games, and animatronics to maintain.
They haven't actually paid off any debt, but they've been able to service their debt. So in other words, make the interest payments.
The company has reported losses 5 of the 6 years since the acquisition. Similar private equity buyouts have contributed to the fall of Toys R Us, Gymboree, and Payless Shoe Source in the past decade.
Oh my god.
To try and keep up with debt payments, Chuck E. Cheese tried revamping again. It retired its famous animatronics, added an interactive dance floor, redesigned the restaurant, and replaced the iconic gold tokens with a Play Pass card. But operating income had slowly been declining, and the last couple years haven't been much better. A 2019 planned reverse merger was going to help them with their debt load, but it didn't come through. Things only got worse when famous YouTuber Shane Dawson posted a video circulating decades-old rumors that Chuck E. Cheese recycled pizza.
Chuck E. Cheese definitely denied that they're recycling their pizza. However, the pictures make it look like they do.
Despite the company's insistence of zero pizza foul play, the damage to Chuck E. Cheese's reputation had been done. Then, as we all know, in 2020, the coronavirus pandemic hit, forcing Chuck E. Cheese to close down locations for dine-in in March.
When you can't have
Man,
kids
there's so much details about a fucking pizza, dude, but I'm not gonna say it.
in for parties, that is kind of their bread and butter, and that's always been their bread and butter. So, like, to lose that during coronavirus, it's really the final nail on the coffin.
By June, only about half of the nearly 560 locations had reopened for dine-in, delivery, or takeout.
Anyone who's in casual dining is much worse off than someone who's like a burger chain has drive-in. Whatever
What
little
about the
revenue
cat?
some of these other restaurants are getting from takeout, that's not really going to help them so much.
Sales declined by 94% during the last 2 weeks in March, and 21% overall in the first quarter. And the company was forced to furlough 65% of its support staff and the majority of hourly employees. By June 25th, the parent company had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, with nearly $2 billion in debt. An announcement of 34 permanent store closures soon followed. Even though this all may look bad, experts say Chuck E. Cheese will be fine. For one, there's its valuable name recognition.
Will the company survive in its current form? It's hard to say. As we saw, even if a concept is not financially viable, the brand itself kind of still has power.
Chuck E. Cheese said it's taking the bankruptcy to offload some debt and restructure.
I think arcades are sick, and I love arcades. I think the problem is that these days, they don't have much of a replayability, and you end up not re-going a lot. Like, I feel like once you've gone like once or twice in a couple months, you're really done with it.
There have even been reports that the company plans to continue opening stores while going through bankruptcy proceedings.
The whole purpose of a Chapter 11 bankruptcy is to try to protect the integrity of the business while getting rid of the large amounts of debt that put the company to bankruptcy.
What are you doing here?
And the Wall Street Journal reported interested buyers.
How are they all so bad?
I think a lot of it depends on what happens with the pandemic and what happens with the economy.
So what Chuck E. Cheese might look like in the future is still unknown, but it's likely the company will have to redesign itself again.
They're definitely going to want to emphasize some of the really nostalgic aspects of the brand, but they're going to have to rethink a lot about what their revenue streams are, how they're making money. Everyone in the restaurant industry is struggling right now, and everyone's kind of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks.
CEC Entertainment did not respond to Business Insider's request for comment.
Well, I mean, no shit.
38 tracks.
The company were cooking on the spot for going bankrupt and $2 billion in debt and getting roasted by some dead YouTuber talking about some fucking weird story with a cat. Oh, asking a story. How do you feel about being broke, in debt, made fun of, and the joke of the fucking nation?
After years of being in storage link.
Broke and a joke. How do you feel about that? $2 billion in debt, you're going to jail. What about that? Like, I don't get that. It's like, what are they gonna say?